Today's episode is brought to you by our company, NanoChomp Marketing Strategy and Analytics. We help product and marketing teams solve problems and experience growth using data and approachable AI. Visit nanochomp.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, on this episode of Soundbites, we had a really great conversation with Adam Coffey. He's an entrepreneur, experienced leader, private equity expert, and best-selling author. His latest book, Empire Builder, it's a must-read for anyone trying to scale their business. So I thought the conversation was really interesting. Derek, what'd you think?
I think it was great. Adam gave really great advice. He started talking about servant leadership. He went into how you grow your business using private equity, some of the misconceptions there, and some of the things to look out for. He talks about having your data systems in place to make the right decisions as a leader. And then he goes into the advice he would give a younger version of himself, as well as work-life balance and order of life priorities. Really great episode.
Yeah, I like the part at the end there where he talks about work-life balance and the importance of family. I think a lot of people who are starting their own business or even just trying to climb that corporate ladder, you sometimes forget about the most important thing, that's family. And he talks about how he's prioritized that in his life. I thought it was really great insight.
Yeah, and gets rid of the misconception that you need to sacrifice everything and focus only on work in order to be successful. So, really great advice there. One of the other parts I liked is when he talks through the transition a founder must take between being a player to being a coach and how to effectively accomplish that.
Yeah, I like that too. And we won't give it all away here. So take a listen to the episode. And as always, let us know what you think.
Thanks so much. And here's Adam.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Soundbites. Today on the podcast, we are so excited to have Adam Coffey. Adam is an entrepreneur, experienced leader, private equity expert, and best-selling author. His latest book, Empire Builder, is a must-read for anyone trying to take their business to 8, 9, or even 10 figures. So we're really glad to have you on today. Thanks so much for joining, Adam.
Well, thank you for having me, Lauren. Derek, good to see you. Hello to all your listeners out there.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. And the way we like to kick things off typically is, walk us through your background a bit. What set you down this path to being an entrepreneur, leader, PE expert, all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
sure. Well, as Derek and I were talking, we both grew up in the same area of Michigan. And early days, I always wanted to be, a professional athlete when I grew up. Well, that path was taken away from me when I blew out a knee, playing hockey as a kid. But so ultimately, I tell people I meet for the first time kind of some, things about me that shaped my life. Number one, served in the U.S. military, so served in the Army as a young guy, and that grounding, learning about, I'll call it servant leadership, teamwork, discipline. Those kind of created the base of the rest of my career. If I didn't serve there like 1,000 years ago, I never make it, where I ultimately wound up going, and am today. So that was number one. Number two, engineering made me a meticulous planner. I'm also a pilot. Pilots don't take off unless they know where they're going. So if I translate that to an entrepreneurial journey, I'm building companies with exits in mind. And I blame being a pilot for that thinking about reverse engineering, call it a hold period or the building of a company. Third, I worked at at GE. I spent 10 years at GE during the Jack Welch era. I call it the Camelot era of GE. Tech doesn't exist yet. GE is number one on the Fortune 500 list. Jack is the world's most admired CEO. That company is growing so fast, it's doubling in size every 2.8 years. And my 10 years at GE and working with Jack taught me how to run a business. And then next up, I spent 21 years as a CEO building 3 national companies for 9 different private equity sponsors. I'm a buy and build guy. I bought 58 companies, put them together. I have billions of dollars in successful exits. Along the way, I started teaching in executive MBA programs. Loved the giving back. That led me to writing the books, which are up there. Blessed to have 3 number one bestsellers, and I love doing that. Wasn't really making any money. I was making a whole bunch of money as a CEO, but I wasn't having fun anymore. After 21 years, I needed a new challenge. And so 2 years ago, I pivoted out of the seat, out of my CEO seat and said, world, I'm done being a CEO. And I started a consulting business. I work more hours today than I ever did as a CEO. I make more money than I did as a CEO. but I'm having fun. And so that's the difference. It kind of reinvigorated my career. I'm 59, and I wanted to do something I was enjoying. And so for me, I've dedicated the rest of my career towards helping entrepreneurs be successful. I wanted to impact multiple companies at a time without having the tactical execution responsibilities of just running one. And so I'm now teaching seminars globally. I'm writing books. I'm consulting. I still work with private equity. I help them evaluate investments, and I work with their CEOs, and I coach their leadership teams. I'm an investor in PE funds, but I'm really focused on trying to help as many entrepreneurs as possible attain success.
Yeah, love that. Love that mission quite a bit. And I think a few things you mentioned on that path to becoming a CEO and then transitioning from your CEO role to what you're doing now. One thing that stands out to me is like, what do you think the misconceptions are, or people that are working their way into leadership, and then what they realize leadership is when they actually get there? What do you think some of the misconceptions about that role is?
So I think as a young guy climbing the corporate ladder, it was more about me and less about we. And I think ultimately, as I finally, call it, reached the pinnacle and started running companies, I recognized that really what I am is I'm the guy who articulates the vision. I create the shared aspiration, but I got to hire a great cast of characters to surround myself with because I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. And so I need people who are tactical experts in many different disciplines. I really learned that, being a CEO and building a successful company is a team sport. And it's not about me. It's about what that team can accomplish. And if you assemble the right cast of characters, it's like being an athlete. When we were growing up and talking about that, it's like you want to win the championship. You don't just need a superstar. You need a team. You need a team of players that can gel and work well together, towards a shared aspiration. And so I think that was probably the biggest lesson. Climbing the corporate ladder in the Fortune 500 world, it's like, okay, it's about my success or my contribution. And as I get up to the more senior ranks, it's not about what I'm doing. It's about what I can do, what the team can do, and can I assemble the right cast of characters. And I think there's a lot of the lessons to be learned there for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, to be successful, have to be anal retentive control freaks when they're running a smaller business. But as they get bigger, they got to learn how to let go, and they got to learn how to be the conductor of the orchestra rather than the first chair player of each section, and they've got to learn to let go and articulate a vision and drive a team and manage process instead of, tactical things. And so I think that's probably my biggest lesson.
I think it seems challenging as an entrepreneur who built something, like it's their baby, and then to have to sort of transition that role from being a control freak to being a team player to being more of a coach and someone who's empowering
Let's
others.
unpack that, because I think, Lauren, that's a key, and it's a
Mm,
key to being able to scale. So I bought
mm,
58 companies. One of the things that I've noticed is, most of those companies were around 20-30 million dollars in revenue. And the last empire I built, I put 23 of those together on top of a platform I was running, sold it multiple times, multiple hold periods. But what I noticed about these entrepreneurs is that, first of all, let's talk statistics. There's 33 million small businesses in America, and those businesses are defined as 500 employees or less. They represent 99.9% of all companies in the country. They employ half the country's workforce, yet only 7% get to $1 million in revenue. And only 4% of those get to 10 million in revenue. And so success, and of those 33 million small companies, only 40% are profitable. 30% break even, 30% lose money, and over half of them will be gone in 5 years. And
mm.
so when you think about how stacked against success the odds are, I call it the unintentional arrogance of success. When I beat the odds and I get past 1 million and I get past 10 million, I got there by being an anal retentive control freak who focused on the minutia, and making sure everything was done. I call it the happy meal effect. So every process, every transaction, I've got my arms around everything. And what happens is I get to 20, 30 million of revenue and I run out of bandwidth and I can no
Right.
longer be that. And so the entrepreneurs who can reach the gearbox and shift gears and go from being the anal retentive control freak to conductor of the orchestra, they now all of a sudden break through that $30 million ceiling. Those are the companies that can get to 100 million and beyond. And it's right there at 20, 30 million in revenue where I saw 58 different entrepreneurs kind of top out. And I'm the guy who takes companies where they've topped out and then I take them someplace different. But I think that's the key to success is learning how to, once you've learned how to be successful, it's learning how to reprogram and make that shift so that you can attain a higher level of success.
And I think that's really hard for so many people. We see it over and over again because people have done something and they've gotten so much success and they know this is the play that works. This is what works. And I know it works because it's worked. And then they get these frustration walls where it's just not working anymore. But they know if they keep doing it, maybe if I just do it harder, it'll work. But that doesn't necessarily happen. It doesn't translate into the next level of growth.
It's a couple other things then that happens is so again that going back to that accidental arrogance of success or unintended arrogance of success. A lot of entrepreneurs think about monetizing their business or selling their business as being a one and done event. I'm gonna I built it. I'm God's gift. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to take my wheelbarrow full of gold and I'm going to go home because I would never stay as a minority shareholder. Heaven forbid, if there was somebody else who was really calling the shots because I'm the only one who knows this business. And I call that first sale as the first rest stop on the wealth creation highway. It's not the end of the road. It's just the first pause. And when I bring in that partner, I may give up control, but now I've gotten one wealth event. Why go start something new and have all the risk in the scale and all that? I can become a rollover investor. I can keep running the business that I already know and built. And now using institutional capital, I can grow faster. I can actually get more aggressive towards growth. And so, I always use Jeff Bezos as the example. So Jeff Bezos, one of the richest people in the world, I think today he's number 3. And he only owns 12% of Amazon, which means that 88% of Amazon is owned by somebody else. Look, if it works for one of the world's most wealthiest, it can work for a small entrepreneur who's got 20, 30 million in revenue too. So, taking on partnerships and being strategic about growth and when to make the first exit, and recognizing that there's multiple exits to be had as we're building this business. I think those are some of the keys to entrepreneurial success. Kind of 2.0. Once you've succeeded in version 1.0, getting the initial scale, there's so many more lessons to learn, to be one of those rare companies. So we talked about 33 million small companies, in this country, but there's only 3,000 companies on the planet that have $1 billion in revenue. So success seems to top out early and large is rare. And it's the difference in skill sets, between those two that are really the keys to achieving something that's truly rare.
I think when we think through that, a lot of people maybe don't know how or don't understand when to start looking for institutional capital. Like, when do I start engaging a PE partner? How do I even go about that? What should I do to structure those deals? And then how should I leverage that into the next rest stop?
So in my opinion, at least, as a guy who spent decades working with private equity firms, there's what I call natural swim lanes. So I've got 6 trillion in capital and all of that capital. So the largest funds that everybody's heard of, like KKR, Apollo, Carlyle, they've got funds that are 10 to 30 billion in size. And then there's 6,000, 7,000 firms, all up and down, some small, some big. Well, they all do the same thing. They all invest 6 to 8% of their capital in a fund in any one company. So by virtue of that, someone who's got a $10 billion fund or a $30 billion fund doesn't buy small companies. It would take them 1,000 years to put all that money to work. So big firms buy big companies, small firms buy small companies. And there's been this creation of what I call 5 natural swim lanes of private capital. And so recognizing how that private capital works, how it's structured is paramount to our success as entrepreneurs. So I tell people there's really two natural exit points when I'm first starting out. So again, pilot, I know my destination. I'm either headed to, I'm going from 0 to 4 million of EBITDA, or I'm going to 10 million of EBITDA. Those are the two natural exit points. The first ones, yes, you can sell companies at $1 million of EBITDA or less. Companies sell every day like that. I helped an entrepreneur sell one earlier this year that had 1.1 million of earnings. He sold it for 8 times. He got 8.8 million. He was thrilled. But real institutional capital, that is real firms that actually raise real funds from a universe of limited partners, the traditional model, they started about $4 million of EBITDA. 3 to 4 million is where they start investing. And those buyers over a 5-year hold period are going to take companies up to about 12 to 15 million of EBITDA. And then they're going to sell them to someone who takes it up to about 40 million of EBITDA. Then someone who goes up to 80, 90, 100, and then 100 to 200, 200 to public. These are the natural exit points. So if you've got 4 million of EBITDA or you're at 2, you build to 4 and you're going to start, attracting what I call the right universe of buyers. And so, if I just take a multiple that would work for a lot of different industries, I could say if I build to 4 million of EBITDA, I'm going to get about an 8 times multiple. I'm going to sell my business for 30 million to 40 million, depending on industry. But if I take it to 10, I got a 9-figure exit. I'm looking at 120 to 150 million now because I'm rarer. I've climbed the pyramid. I've gotten bigger. I'm attracting a bigger crowd of buyers. There's fewer assets to buy. So I'm going to be rewarded with a higher multiple. So if I'm an entrepreneur, unless I'm going to go early, I'm going to go to 4 million of EBITDA or I'm going to go to 10 million of EBITDA as kind of the two minimum sizes where I'm going to then start to entertain my exits. And so what I've been doing now as a coach, I work with entrepreneurs in these different size categories, and I'm helping them get to that level. I started working with a company about 18 months ago. They were under 2 million of EBITDA. Today, they're crossing 10 million of EBITDA. Only 18 months later, we started doing a buy and build. We started buying. I'm teaching entrepreneurs how to do what I was doing on a large, stage with institutional capital. I'm teaching entrepreneurs how to do that at a smaller level, on a smaller scale. But like that company now, we're hiring a banker. We're headed to the market, and we'll sell for somewhere around 150, 160 million on a company that had less than 2 million of EBITDA, 18 months ago. So, how big we get is a function of how big we dream, and then how good we are at the tactical execution, the shifting gears, and then learning the steps to take.
No, that's incredible. Like going from 2 million to a huge exit over 18 months is really, really outstanding. And then in your latest book, I think one of the points you made that really stuck with us was something you probably intuitively know, but then when you put a framework around it, we grab the bigger companies can command bigger multiples because the funds that are being able to invest in them are larger with more capital, and then there are fewer of them. So we started thinking about that, and one of the recent examples we saw of that gone wrong was a company called Farfetch. They started buying assets to get themselves big for an exit, but the assets they were purchasing were probably not necessarily in line with their overall corporate strategy. They were just trying to get put on mass. They were cultivating mass to get a bigger multiple.
And I think that's one of the mistakes or risks, right? So if you're
Yeah.
going to do a buy and build, I tell people before you buy anything, it's all about strategy, and it's all about understanding what good looks like before I even start looking for companies. What's the strategy I'm adopting? What am I trying to accomplish? What type of company is the perfect acquisition that's going to allow me to hit that strategy and make it work? And it's like, I think too often, even at the PE level, I see PE firms do this a lot too. It's like, I buy for the sake of buying. I buy because I want to bulk up, but I haven't put the strategy in, and I don't know what good looks like. I call it shiny penny syndrome. I just start chasing anything. Everything looks good. I overlook all the flaws. I don't have a strategy, and so I'm collecting assets. And you don't get rewarded with a high multiple when a buyer detects that you're a loose collection of assets, not an integrated company with a growth strategy that you're pursuing. So I think we have to be real careful up front. in a
Mhm.
buy and build strategy, or when we're thinking about M&A as a growth strategy, we really need to focus on, why am I doing this? What's the strategy? What am I trying to accomplish? And then what does good look like? And only buy good companies is another piece of advice I would give people. You think about baseball. Ty Cobb, highest batting average of all baseball players in the history of the game, and I think his career average is in the 340s. He had some years over 400. Well, that means that he struck out, or made an out like 6 out of 10 times. If you're doing a buy and build as a business, as an entrepreneur, you better be batting 980 plus. You bet, out of 20 acquisitions, you can afford one bad one, but you can't afford to go, to buy bad companies. I always tell people, only buy good companies with good reputations, with excellent leadership, with great cultures that align with your own thinking. We don't have time in life for a fixer upper, kind of buy and build. We want to buy good companies, put them together, and let the naturally occurring arbitrage, which is the difference in multiple we'll sell at, versus the multiple we're buying small companies at and putting them together. We'll let that naturally occurring arbitrage create our profit or our upside. We don't want to be in the business of fixing other people's messes. It'll detract you from your entrepreneurial journey. And there's one thing a rich person cannot buy, no matter how much money, even Jeff Bezos cannot buy, and that's time. And
Hmm.
so we only want to buy good companies when we're doing mergers and acquisitions.
Something that I'm thinking about as you're talking about these processes, like you've been working with this company for the last 18 months, taking it from 2 million to 18. I think that's exciting. What does working with you look like in that capacity? You're working with somebody who is so attached to this thing. They probably acknowledge that they need help because they wouldn't be contacting you otherwise. But I'm sure there's like some ego there and maybe some attachment.
Oh, there's
So
always ego there, but I would say, unless you've had billion-dollar exits, I win, right?
right,
So I
right.
have credibility of having done it, and I think when we work with coaches, or we work with mentors, oftentimes it's like, okay, are they teaching me from a position of theory, or have they walked the walk and been on the
Mm,
road, that I'm seeking to travel? And I think what adds credibility for me with a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with is just simply that I'm not teaching theory. I'm teaching as a guy who's built three, national empires, and has billions of dollars in exits, and has bought 58 companies and put them together. So I'm a practitioner, as
Mhm.
opposed to
yeah.
just someone who's teaching theory. And there's nothing wrong with theory. We've all had great college professors, somewhere in our background, who really helped us, or shaped us, or helped us, with our thinking. So it's not all about just practical experience. I think there's a place for both. But because I have built companies, I've had thousands of employees, I've had billion-dollar exits, I think I have a lot of credibility. And the fact that I started at the bottom, in the
Mm.
service, I was a private, E1 in the United States Army. I look up and I saw bubble gum on the bottom of somebody's shoe. That's how low I was. And I've held every job a person can hold on an organizational chart, including spending 21 years as a CEO up at the top, and not once, not just a one hit wonder, multiple industries, multiple companies, multiple ownership periods. So I think it's credibility that helps diffuse, call it that arrogance of success that somebody has.
One of the things I really liked from your latest book, you talked through the importance of finding markets that are excessively fragmented. And I think a lot of people overlook those. They just walk right past them. And one example we have is some of our good friends own a pest control company. And when we think through what they've done on the surface, when they're starting it, we're like, you're gonna kill bugs. But then they have 5 locations, and then they're in 10 states, and then they got 20 locations, and then the revenue is
There's
very
some
attractive.
multi-billion-dollar PE-backed roll-ups in pest control. So let me tell you something else I mentioned in the book. Why I love that particular industry, for one. We want, if we're going to build if we're an entrepreneur, we're starting out. What do we build? Or I'm a executive MBA and I'm graduating. I'm gonna work with a search fund. I'm gonna go buy something. What am I gonna buy? And I focus on a framework for finding a higher probability of success. So it starts with needs versus wants. If there's a hole in my roof and it's raining outside and there's water falling on my head, I need my roof fixed. I want accessories for my monster truck. My wife wants a new outfit, because we're going to a wedding or something. But there's needs versus wants. We want to build empires that are focused on needs, not wants. In a bad cycle, a recession, in a downturn, people can delay spending on wants indefinitely, but we can't delay spending on needs. So if we want to be insulated from the ups and downs of the economies, we focus on needs, not wants. Next up, we want to focus on recurrent revenue streams versus project related. So first of all, bug control, or pest control. If I live in Texas or Florida, Arizona, Southern California, pick a place with giant bugs. It's like, I need pest control. That's a need, not a want. When stuff starts coming through the walls into my house and my wife is freaking out and my daughter's freaking out, it's like, that's a need. All right. But recurrent pest control, I sign a contract with my customer. Every month, I hit their credit card for my monthly fee. And in pest control, we only come out once a quarter. So every month, I bill all my clients, instant collection. I've got recurrent revenue. It's contracted revenue. Most people, I've been in this house for 3 years. I've got pest control contracts. I forget about it. It's just hitting my credit card, and and they're coming out and providing the service. Thank you. And so it's a recurrent revenue stream. And so now when I'm spending time marketing to customers, it's not a one and done sale, but I'm actually getting a recurrent revenue stream that's going to last for a long time. So now my efforts are more around growth, less around keeping revenue. If I have a company that is not recurrent revenue, it's project based. Every time I'm done, I'm looking for now an entirely new set of customers to replace the ones I just did a project for because they're done and I don't have a recurrent revenue stream. So needs versus wants, recurrent versus recurring, or recurrent versus project based. All of these things help me with valuation. But the reason we want fragmented is, if I'm a small entrepreneur and maybe I am going to do a buy and build and I'm going to put some companies together, heavy fragmentation, tens of thousands of companies in an industry, in the country, means that there aren't enough buyers to drive up the prices. And so small companies are going to trade for a small multiple. And as I get bigger, I'm rarer, I trade for a higher multiple, and that arbitrage is created, results in a higher level of profitability. And so I've run companies and built billion-dollar businesses in what I call moderately fragmented industry, which after a decade of a few companies buying everybody, we're like playing Pac-Man, and all of a sudden all the dots are gone and we're looking at each other and it's like, now what? So heavy fragmentation ensures the success that small companies sell for low prices. The big companies are rare. They're going to sell for a higher price. And if I want to combine some doing a buy and build, fragmentation is my friend. And it's the key to me being, to generating outsized returns for my efforts.
Yeah, I think it's a really good strategy. And I think it's something that people overlook, especially when people are looking to create a startup. They want to build an AI startup. They want to build a technology startup. They want to build these high risk, potentially high reward companies that have actually very, very low probability of success and scale. And they walk right past really attractive industries that can create sustainable revenue.
Yeah. So let's
We
talk
see,
about sexy versus not sexy, right?
yeah,
So my first company was a medical services company. So that was a little bit sexy. But my second empire was a commercial laundry company, not very sexy. And my third was an HVAC company, not very sexy either, but the companies and industries like pest control, you mentioned, landscape maintenance, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, as you mentioned, industries like that they aren't very sexy. They're also very much in need.
Mm-hmm.
And goes back to, everybody wants to try to create something new. And I think Warren Buffett taught us, you don't have to create something new. Take something boring, that's a need that's recurrent, and, make your investment in something that you know and understand. You don't have to create the next thing. You can take the old thing, that's out there. And right now, in this time in history for entrepreneurs, it is the biggest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. As the baby boomer generations are all aging out, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies out there where the founder is now retiring, leaving, dying, and there's this transfer going on. It's a great time to be an entrepreneur.
I didn't know if you had a question,
No,
Derek.
no, I was
I
going
didn't
to
want to
let you.
interrupt you.
I didn't want to step on you when you were coming in. Sorry.
You play this game. I'm trying not to step over the other person. I had a question as you were talking through your history. You mentioned that you were at GE for 10 years and then 21 years as a CEO. So, but you've never had more fun and you've never enjoyed your work. And you've never worked more than what you're doing now. So how do you, um, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Is it really just helping these companies grow? Is it like, and how do you work past the grind? Because we work in consulting too. We understand how much time and how much work it is. But what is making this job your favorite?
Well, so I've achieved some level of financial success in my life, and
Mhm.
so money is not necessarily the driving factor for me anymore. I'm very much cognizant of the fact that I'm a fairly religious person. I'll tell you, it's like I'm blessed. I feel a need that I need to give back, and I need to have justified the wealth that I created by helping others, and so I volunteer. I work at my daughter's school. I'm the planning and zoning commissioner for my town.
Oh
I
wow.
volunteer of my time. I still speak at universities, and I'm not paid for that work. And I'm very, we talked about my three books. I donate 100% of my royalties to charity.
Wow.
100%. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, all donated to charity. And so
Mm.
I'm blessed. And but when I think about what the grind that I got tired of after 21 years, it was like I have thousands of employees. He said, she said, he touched me, she said that. It's like all the crap that goes with running, call it a company, and tactical execution after 21 years. It's like I'm bored, and so what I get to do now is I get to take the cumulative strategy and learning, and I help people with strategy, but they're responsible for tactical execution. And I've also learned and recognized that the tools for growth and bending the growth curve and building empires is really generic. And so when I partner with an entrepreneur, or a PE firm, it's like, and they buy a company and there's an entrepreneur there, they're experts in the field. I'm an expert in growing big companies. And when you put my strategy as to how what the tools are and how to implement them, but then I make them responsible for tactical execution, the minutia, then that gives me the freedom to now work. I'm working in like 15 different industries right now. Virtually all of them I was never a CEO in, and we're having success. So I'm learning how to partner with people. It's new, it's engaging, it's been a lot of fun. And I think the one big lesson that I've learned, I get this question a lot, and I might be going out of order here, but when people say, Adam, if you could live your life over again, what's the one thing you would change? And to me, the one thing I would have changed, I would have quit being a CEO a decade earlier. you know when you're a CEO building a big company, I got blinders on. I have to ignore the world because I'm focused on my shareholders and my culture and my company, and I'm building one thing. But 2 years out of the seat with the blinders off, the opportunities that exist, that are coming my way, have been just a lot of fun and fascinating. And I told people when I first left, my biggest paydays were probably behind me now. And but now that I've got 2 years with no blinders, again, I'm making more money today than I did as a CEO, and I made a lot of money as a CEO. So what am I learning? I'm learning that my biggest paydays are still ahead of me, and I wish I would have pivoted out of the CEO seat earlier, and taken my wisdom gained through making every mistake on the book. Mind you, I'm not the smartest guy on the planet who made no mistakes. It's because I've spent 35 years making mistakes. I can write books and help you from making the same mistakes, which is kind of been fun. So for me, that's what gets me up in the morning. I get up at 4 a.m. every day, and between the hours of 4 and 6:30, that's me time. The world's sleeping. My family's asleep. That's my quiet time. All my books are written between 4 a.m. and 6:30. All of my strategic planning for myself, my family, my own empire, all of that's going on very early. And then I get ready for the day, and my actual calendar starts at 7 a.m. Great study for your listeners out there. If you Google Harvard Business Review successful people time management, you'll bring it up. They did a review of very successful people, namely these were all CEOs. How do nothing to do with how they got there. You are there. How do you manage your time? And I think the results of that can be very eye-opening, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs are so busy being busy that they aren't taking the time to be strategic, and they've become a piece on the chessboard rather than watching over the top of the chessboard and thinking about strategy. And I think one of the most shocking learnings for me was very, very successful people calendar up to 25% of their time to be alone and to be
Hmm.
strategic. And it's not about how many hours we work, it's about how impactful we are with the hours that we choose to work. And what's our framework for thinking strategic every day? And there are times we have to be tactical, but most entrepreneurs are so busy being busy that they're not being strategic. They're too in the weeds. And so I thought that was a great study for your listeners too.
That's a good one. We're gonna check it out because that's been our experience too. Is that so many people are so focused on I have to do this because this is what I do, like the tactical execution, that they don't even get to think about, execute, or test the I wonder if, like those I wonder if questions, I wonder if moments that just get completely pushed to the side. Something you stated about taking the blinders off reminded me. We repeatedly, in all the businesses that we go into, everything we touch, invariably, no matter the size, whether it's a Fortune 500 tech company or a smaller direct to consumer brand, all of their data systems, we haven't walked into one where their data was good, right? The
Yeah.
data they were collecting was bad. The way they were utilizing it was let's just call it bad. Like I won't get too flowery, but effectively bad. And that was always our first step, because we always thought we were gonna, we'll come in on third base, we'll help them take it home, and we're good to go. And then our flaw, we were just wrong in our philosophy, was we got to jump all the way back to go. And what data are you collecting? Why are you collecting it? What are you doing? Has that been your experience too?
Absolutely. So when I'm in a business or running a business or working with an entrepreneur, one of the first things that we focus on is, first of all, what's the goal and objective? I'm a pilot. I'm taking off. Where am I going to land? What are we trying to accomplish here? What's the game we're playing? Once we identify that, then it's what's the strategy that's going to take us from where we are today to that destination. So what are the 5 or 6 initiatives that we're going to focus on that are going to drive us there? And then I get to who in my organization is going to be responsible for each of these, initiatives. And then it goes right to measurement systems. How am I going to keep score? How do I know if I'm winning? How do I know if my 5 or 6 initiatives are actually working? And I remember Jack, always would say, look, if you can't measure it, then ignore it. It's like if you can't put a measurement in place to understand whether or not you're winning, you don't know if the work you're doing is having the right impact. And if you can't measure it, then ignore it for now. Maybe the
Sure.
right initiative, but we can't address it today because I don't have the sophistication to deal with that. And oftentimes when I got into a business, to start, I'll tell you that I feel like a captain on a big ship, and I walk up on the on the bridge. I'm looking at the dash with all the dials and gauges, and I'm like, nothing works. Hello, it's like we're sailing in the fog. We don't know where we're going. The radar's broken, and none of my gauges are working. And so the first thing I have to do is, even if it's rudimentary, is come up with some type of a measurement system or a KPI, a network of KPIs, so that I can at least start tracking basic productivity measures. Good example. I get into a company that has like 8 or 9 different disparate systems, no ERP in place. It's like they're doing data entry 8, 9 times. If I ask the same question of each department, I get a different answer. There's no source of truth. Everything's garbage. And so I walk into HR. It's like, do we know how many employees we have? Yes, I know. I know, and I'm pretty accurate. Okay, good. I can walk into accounting. Do we know how much revenue we have in total? Yes, I'm good. Do we know what our earnings are? I hope we do, because we have to pay taxes. Yes. So I got like these 3 things. Okay, I can immediately say, what's my revenue per employee? What's my net profit per employee? I now have a basic measuring system. And so while I'm investing in technology and maybe taking time to fix all these data systems, data problems that you're talking about, I can at least start putting in some kind of basic metrics in place so that we know if the ship is pointed in the right direction. And then as time goes by and we were making investments and we're cleaning house, we get a lot more sophisticated, and data helps us. I'm always technology driven and data driven. And so I'm always investing in technology because I think it's a key driver of productivity. And that's a key driver of margin improvement and profitability. And usually when I'm in a company, it's a turnaround is where I'm starting with something that doesn't work very well. Otherwise, they wouldn't have needed a new CEO, to
Sure.
begin with. And so I'm going in to fix something and then scale it and build it to a large size quickly. That's kind of my role. So I think data and measuring, has got to be central to everything we do. And if I can go on one tangent for just a minute, I think when we think about the types of companies, you've been talking about pest control, so let's go back to pest control for a minute. So let's say I've got 500 employees. I'm a big company. I'm very successful. I've got hundreds of vehicles out there, and I'm going to buy 20 new vehicles this year. Well, who do I give those 20 vehicles to? Usually it would be the pest control dude who's got the oldest truck with the most mileage. Not in my world. Who's got the best metrics? Who's producing the most revenue? Who's got the highest customer satisfaction? Who's got the fewest callbacks because they did a poor job? Show me the best employee who's hitting all their metrics, and that person's getting a new truck every year when I buy new trucks. And the person who's off their metrics gets the hand-me-down dog of the fleet. So I not only put the metrics in place so I can keep score, but then I also make these same metrics visible to all, and then central to how I think about raises, reductions in force if I have to restructure something. Who am I going to invest in? And who am I going to promote? It's like all of these things are central to building success.
It's really funny you mentioned that because they have one for each office that's always the new one, and it's black and it's got a sweet livery on it, and they call it the tarantula, and that's for the best employee in the branch, which is kind of funny. But to your other point about data, we end up quoting the Cheshire Cat more than we care to admit. And it's like, if you don't know where you're going, any direction will get you there. And then
Yeah.
we end up starting there pretty frequently with client engagements, which is interesting. We should brainstorm about that afterwards. So what does that future look like for you now? Like we're seeing AI coming into the world, changing things the way the invention of the internet changed things. So what are we seeing that look like for a future perspective for what you're doing?
So I think AI ultimately will be transformational, and I think technology will continue to evolve. We driverless cars would have been a strange Star Wars episode from 20, 30 years ago. It's like the technology is moving us faster, and social media is connecting us deeper, and it makes the global world shrink very, very small. So I expect that to continue. I think right now today, from an AI perspective, the world's playing with AI, and there are great use cases that are already coming out, but I think we're still playing with it, much the way the first video game owners had Pong, and hooked it up to their TVs and started playing with it. I think we're in the very early innings and stages, of AI. So I think it ultimately will transform, but I don't think it'll replace, call it human effort. I think it'll augment human effort. I'm a writer, and I play with Chat GPT just like everyone else does. And frankly, I can look at any social media post and tell you in a microsecond whether it was written by Chat GPT or a person. And I stopped using it, and I went back to, I've got my own message that I want to bring. And yes, that was fun and it was cute, but it's getting old now already. So I think you have broad a desire for AI adaptation, but I think we're still all struggling. There are no AI experts today yet, and I think we're all learning and we're playing with the early innings, of this technology. But I think just as the last 40 years have evolved, I'm 59, so it's not like I'm 100, in 9. I'm only 59, so I'm 59. Hey, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are still older than me, and they're still blockbuster movies, so I'm not dead yet. But if I just look in my life, I go back to when I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan. There were 5 channels on the TV. There were no video games. There were no VCRs, and your listeners don't even know what the hell that is, or DVDs or what's that, no cable, no streaming, no internet, no desktop computers, no cell phones. We were in the dark ages. and that was in my career, professional lifetime. My first computer as an engineer was made by a company called Osborne, and it cost like, $15,000, $20,000. It weighed 35 pounds. That was the first laptop. And the front folded down and had a little green screen and a keyboard. It's like technology has moved so fast just in my career. I can't even imagine how fast it'll move in the next 30 years. And so I think, ideally as entrepreneurs, we need to embrace change. We need to be flexible with new technologies. We need to look at and not ignore these new tools that are being developed, because I do think they will transform business over the next 30 years. So we want to be early adopters, and have an open mind and not be closed-minded. My dad, who passed away recently at 89, he was the guy who retired never having had a computer on his desk. And I remember him telling me, I'll never have a computer on my desk. A few years into retirement, he's ordering cars on the internet, and it's like, doing all his shopping on Amazon. I'm like, yeah, Dad, there's that guy who would never have a computer on his desk. So we can't be dinosaurs. We need to be progressive as we think about the changes in technology and how to adapt those. But I would say that we also don't want to be overly reliant on it either. We want to maintain our creative edge and use these things as tools to enable us, not to replace, creative thought.
No, I love that answer. And as we wrap up here, you already answered the question of what advice would you give your younger self? And I loved it, because I think we've all been in certain roles that we probably should have quit earlier, but maybe just we weren't ready to at the time, or didn't have the foresight or understanding of why. But I have a curveball question, just because you've mentioned your family a few times here. You were just talking about your dad. And I think in your bio, you said family is the most important. So, and I agree with you. This is probably outside of your official consulting capacity, but I'm sure you run into a lot of entrepreneurs who struggle with that balance of family and how to make that successful while also building this business. So, like, on a personal level, what advice would you give to people who are trying to grow this business, trying to scale, but also, not neglect or focus on the biggest business, which is your family?
Yeah, so this is a lesson I think I learned through the school of hard knocks, right? So if I look at what's my one real failure in life, it was the failure of my first marriage. I laugh about it and call it my starter marriage. And I have a couple older kids now from that first marriage, and I, and it was a personal failure, and I think about the lessons that I've learned when I was so busy being busy and climbing the corporate ladder and chasing success, that somewhere along the way I lost the grounding that family is central to all that we do. And I think about every company I've built and every company I've run, and the day after I left, well, somebody new came in and took over, right? And so all that time, passion, effort that we put into something, really, other than that some people still follow me and say, Jesus, I miss him, or it was he did great, or I miss those days. Thankfully it's not, boy, I'm glad that jerk is gone. So I was known for building strong cultures. But I think very quickly companies move on, and it's like our importance to the world, really to the business world, is really insignificant. And, it's like the only reason I ever existed 50 years from now is because my kids will then be adults and doing whatever it is that they're doing. That's the only reason I'm here today, because the business wars will be forgotten, and any accomplishments in climbing the corporate ladder or how much money I had in my bank account, all of that stuff just goes away. And so I think it's, we're driven to find success. I think the earlier in life we can learn the lesson that we need to be driven by, and we need to redefine success. And success needs to include, our spouse, our significant other, our children, and being there and being present. It's like I work in my daughter's school every week. I have a pretty high net worth, but I make the time, to be in my daughter's school, working in that school. I make time to give back at the city level. I work with entrepreneurs. I'm meeting with a client today for lunch that is no longer a client, and so, but we're still connected, and it's like, so it's like from my perspective, the human element, the family aspect, that's key to our success. And it's not about how hard we work. It's about how effective we are when we are working. But knowing how to turn that off and to find that balance, earlier you do that in life, the more successful and fulfilling I think your life will become.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I think when people are looking at a metric or they're looking at the outcome, they're like, I can catch up with that later. I can catch up with that later. But the world's still rotating around you, and if you're not present, it'll leave you behind, right? So those are
Think
the
about a live event. You can't go to a live event. Everyone's got their cell phone. We live life with one hand, and then we're always looking at what we're filming. We never see the live concert. Like I've stopped doing that. It's like, put the damn cell phone away and live in the moment, enjoy life. 50 million other people are recording it for you. You're not going to miss anything. Don't worry about it. But it's like, be present, and be present for your kids. Be active in in your community, and give back. And it's like, boy, it's a more fulfilling journey when you learn how to incorporate that. I think we all ultimately learn that lesson. Even Steve Jobs learned that lesson on his deathbed. Acknowledged, how much money I have just really doesn't matter when I'm going to be dead in 2 weeks. And so I wish I would have done this. Well, don't be the person that wishes. Do it now.
Love that.
And I think that is probably the best stopping point that we could have, that was just gifted to us. So I think that's really, really great. Really good advice. Love the conversation. Adam, we really, really appreciate the time that you took to come today and have a chat with us. And we really look forward to having conversations in the future.
Well, that's great. Nice to meet you both. And thanks to your listeners for hanging out and joining us in this conversation.
Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate it.